My name is Ellie. I'm 36 years old and I work as a financial manager at a small investment firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. 6 years ago, I married Thomas, the man I thought would be my safe harbor for life. Thomas wasn't overly romantic, but he was kind, calm, and always made me feel heard. We weren't perfect, but we made a great team. We lived in a small vintage house in the suburbs. Every morning he made the coffee, I made breakfast. We had our disagreements, sure, but we always worked them out before bed. It was those simple routines that made me feel like the luckiest woman. That is, until Avery, my younger sister, reappeared in my life, bringing with her a storm I never saw coming. Avery is 4 years younger than me. She had been living in Austin with her ex-boyfriend, a flashy, boastful lawyer I never liked. They broke up suddenly, I never got the details. One day she just called, her voice tight and cracking. "I don't have anywhere else to go." I knew Avery wasn't the type to admit defeat easily, so hearing her voice like that made my heart sink. I said right away, "Come home. Stay with Mom and Dad if you want, or we have a spare room." A few days later, Avery rolled her suitcase onto my porch just before midnight. Her eyes were shadowed, her lips pale, and it was obvious she'd been crying the whole drive from Texas to North Carolina. I hugged her tight, hiding the creeping anxiety in my chest. Avery had always been the princess in Mom's eyes. Ballet recitals, expensive lace dresses, her own curling iron in elementary school, she had it all. Me? I was happy with a pair of running shoes and a good book. Dad loved me, but he was soft. And Mom? She never hid her favoritism. Even after all those years apart, I thought time and distance might have softened the past. I wanted to believe that now, as adults, we could start fresh. She stayed with our parents for the first few weeks, but then she started calling me almost every night, complaining about being controlled, saying, "Mom still thinks I'm 17. I understood that feeling. So I brought it up to Thomas. He's an HR manager at a large software company in Uptown. Knowing Avery had a degree in communications, I asked, "Would you mind checking if your company has any roles that might fit her? I don't want her falling further behind." Thomas hesitated but agreed. He'd met Avery a few times during the holidays and used to describe her as sweet but unpredictable. A week later, she landed a job in internal comms. The starting salary wasn't bad. Avery lit up like a kid on Christmas morning, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I thought things were going to be okay. I believed I was doing the right thing, but it turns out I was the one who opened the door and invited the storm in. Things started changing about 2 months after Avery started working at Thomas's company. At first it was little things, private conversations between them. I noticed that whenever I walked into the living room, they'd burst out laughing mid-sentence, then glance at each other like they'd shared something I wasn't meant to hear. When I asked what was funny, Thomas would shrug. "Just work stuff." Avery would beam. "You wouldn't get it, Ellie." I'm not a suspicious person. I trusted my husband. But over time, an unease began creeping in, quiet, cold, and relentless, like water seeping under the floor. One Wednesday afternoon, I got off work earlier than usual. I came in through the back door, an old habit from my college days. The door was already open. The kitchen was silent, but I could hear laughter upstairs. My steps slowed as I recognized the voices. Avery and Thomas. They were talking, and then came laughter. Intimate and oddly warm. I called out, "Thomas?" The footsteps upstairs stopped immediately. A few moments later, Thomas came down, looking calm and casual. "You're home early. Avery and I were working on some slides for Friday's presentation." Avery followed right behind him, still holding her laptop. She smiled like she belonged there. I didn't say much, but I couldn't shake the growing discomfort. A week later, I noticed something strange. I'm a creature of habit. Even the way I make the bed follows a routine. I always fold the blanket neatly with the pillow openings facing the headboard. A tiny habit, but mine. That afternoon, when I walked into our bedroom, I froze. The pillows were off-center. One of the pillowcases was flipped the wrong way. I stared at the bed, heart pounding, trying to reason it out. Maybe I was tired. Maybe Thomas made the bed. I went downstairs and asked, "Did you go into our bedroom today?" Thomas looked up from his phone, startled. "No, why?" The bed was different, the pillows were off. He laughed lightly. "Maybe you were rushing this morning and didn't notice. I didn't touch anything." I didn't push it, but that night, I couldn't sleep. All the little things were adding up. The looks they shared, the cut-off conversations, how Avery seemed to be at my house every time I came home. One day I called Avery during lunch. It rang for a long time, then went to voicemail. I didn't think much of it, until Thomas texted me saying he was out to lunch with coworkers. In the selfie he sent, Avery was right beside him, holding a smoothie and smiling wide. No one said anything wrong, no one crossed a clear line, but I felt like I was slowly being pushed out of my own life, gently, quietly, without a trace. I started coming home earlier, hoping to catch something more concrete than a misaligned pillow, but each time they were there. Smiling, cheerful, discreet. I had no proof, but I knew. Some part of me was screaming, something's not right. Something is happening in your own home, Ellie. And I was still clinging to whatever piece I had left, like gripping a railing in a storm that hadn't fully formed. I never thought I'd have to question the man I chose to marry, but the more I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, the more the truth started showing through, like a crack in glass, small but impossible to ignore. That Friday night, I suggested a weekend getaway to Asheville. It was a place we used to visit after we got married, pine forests and cozy cafes tucked in the mountains. Thomas agreed immediately, even seemed excited, but I had a purpose. I needed to know. I needed an answer. That evening, after a romantic dinner by the lake, we took a walk through the historic district. Thomas held my hand like always, told stories about work, added in a few soft jokes. I listened, but my mind was making a plan. That night, in our rented wooden cabin, after washing up and getting ready for bed, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at him. "Thomas," I said, voice low but steady, "I need to ask you something. You and Avery. Something's off. I've felt it for a while, but now, I want the truth. Is there something going on between you two?" He stood still for a moment, still buttoning his pajama shirt. I saw his eyes shift, a flash of surprise, then avoidance. "What are you saying, Ellie? You think I'd... with your sister?" I stayed silent, waiting. He stepped closer and then exhaled, a long breath, like he was letting go of everything. His eyes reddened and his voice cracked. "I'm sorry. Ellie, I didn't mean for it to go this far. It started with talking, just talking. Avery really understands me, then things just happened. I couldn't stop it. I don't know how long I sat there. Everything around me froze. The words echoed like they came from another world. Thomas? The man I once trusted more than anyone was now standing in front of me, confessing to a betrayal with my own sister. Was it in our house? I asked, even though part of me already knew the answer. He lowered his head, said nothing. That silence hurt more than any confession. I stood up, grabbed my coat and purse, and walked out of the cabin without looking back. One thought ran through my mind. I couldn't spend another second next to him. I drove back to Charlotte in the middle of the night, the sound of rain tapping on the windshield and my heart pounding in my chest. I don't even remember how I made it home. When I pulled into the driveway, the sun was already rising, and the emptiness inside me had never felt more real. Thomas came back that afternoon in an Uber. He brought a suitcase and eyes full of guilt. I didn't say a word, just walked into the bedroom and closed the door. He packed a few things and left. For good this time. I called a lawyer the next morning. No tears, no dramatic scenes. Just an end. Clear and final. I called my